I decided to write Traversing the Traction Gap for a number of reasons, but the primary reason behind it was the tremendous amount of failures that I saw, and it was a pattern that began to emerge over the course of the first 5 to 7 years. What I saw was that we have these really, really smart product teams come in. They would present an interesting set of ideas. They had some kind of usually technical solution. And then they would actually build the product. If we invested in them, they would build the product. But the results could be dramatically different. Typically, the products that they built worked. That is, what they said they set out to do, those products actually solved the problem. I realized that most of them came out of university, they came out of a great company, they might have come out of Salesforce or out of Google or out of Oracle, etc. So they were really adept at the product engineering. But most of them had never actually taken a product successfully to market. There were others who did that, and I don't mean selling per se, I mean positioning the product, etc. And what I realized, the pattern matching that occurred was the successful teams had been part of companies where they were intimately involved in what I call market engineering. This concept stands for a variety of different things, but for the most part, it means category creation, inserting yourself as the category leader, creating the thought leadership, the talk track for thought leadership, in addition to the talk track for sales. And that was one of the big epiphanies I had. The companies that didn't really declare MVP until they had a highly polished product and had performed all of the product engineering work and the market engineering work were the ones that actually went on to succeed. The ones who had not completed all of those tasks but felt pressure from their investors, from the market, declared early and had problems. So the traction gap framework is really the output of thinking about these 3 fundamental phases: the go-to-product phase, the go-to-market phase, and the go-to-scale phase. And the traction gap itself is the period of time from initial product release to this theoretical point in time that I call minimum viable traction, which is, if you can reach this point, I'll explain what it is in a second. If you can reach this point, this is when term sheets will fly in from all over the place. Everybody's really interested in investing in your company. But you have to get there. You have to go from this initial product release to this minimum viable traction point, and you have to do it within a certain amount of time in order to generate awareness and interest from investors. So the concept of the framework is really quite simple. It's, how do I take a company, take an idea, how do I turn that idea into an offering, how do I take that offering into the market, and once I'm in the market, how do I ensure that it successfully scales? If you can talk about a new idea in terms that other people already understand, the new idea becomes understandable, right? So I decided to adopt MVP, minimum viable product, because everybody knows what that is, and develop the framework, not with 30 different names, but 3 or 4 very unique points in time from ideation to this theoretical point in time called minimum viable traction, because then we can all have an intelligent discussion about where are we, what do we need to do to get to that next value inflection point. So the traction gap framework itself is larger than the traction gap period. So it begins with minimum viable category right after ideation, which is, what is the category that we want to create or redefine? Why do we need to do that? Well, because we don't want to play in someone else's kingdom, because they get to define all the rules. We want to create a new kingdom with our own rules, and we talk a lot about that in the book. Minimum viable product, we know what that is. Initial product release, that's just a few, maybe 6 months to 12 months prior. The MVP is the polished version of that initial product release. And then from there, we talk about something called minimum viable repeatability. The important thing here is it's not just about revenue. It's not or usage. It's not with your products. It has to do with team members. Have you hired multiple team members? Have you delivered multiple products into the market? What's really happening is you're going from sort of a team that just started working together to a team that's really performing together. And you can begin to see more reliability, more predictability in the business model. And so it's no wonder why a lot of venture firms want to wait until this magical minimum viable repeatability. Minimum viable traction really occurs if you can keep quarter-over-quarter growth rates up 12 to 18 months from there. Market engineering, like product engineering, actually needs to be architected. So what are the elements of architecture for market engineering? Those elements include things like category creation, this idea that I'm going to either create a brand new category and install myself as the category king, or I'm going to take an existing category and I'm going to redefine that category so that way I can then install myself as the category king. A lot of research has been done. One of my favorite books that encapsulates the research is a book called Play Bigger. A friend of mine was one of the authors.
Great book.
He's and Christopher Lochhead is just a very interesting human being, who I enjoy a lot. So Chris and the team that wrote the book, they discovered that roughly 76% of all profits go to the category king, and you can see this across all markets. The question is how big is the market? You want to be the category king of a market that matters. A common mistake for product teams is to talk about a market as though there's X amount of dollars being spent in it as it currently is defined, but you're not that, and you're never going to be all that. You're solving a different problem. So market engineering tasks include, okay, so what is the category? Category is another name for a problem. What's the problem that you're solving? How big is that problem? And have you done any statistically validated research? Because this is the other kneecapper for most companies. Most market research for most technology companies involves 10 or less customers or others. This is what goes into making multi-million, $100 million decisions. That's what we're using as statistically valid. And you want to know why 85% of all products fail? It's directly related to that. The number one reason from CV Insights is no market need. So why are you even starting? So we did a lot of research for this book. Probably took us at least 6 months, and then we went back and we went through and we spoke with many successful founders and CEOs. The hardest part of those interviews was the fact that none were really familiar with the traction gap framework. Gee, I don't know why. Everybody, though, was very familiar with when they raised capital. So they were able to think back when they got their seed round or their A round or their B round because those were important moments in time. So instead of saying MVR and MVT, et cetera, what we did is we described what those points were. And an amazing thing came out of that. All of the CEOs and founders could tell you when they knew they were it, when it was going to happen for them. MVR, they knew that moment in time really, really well. And so,
almost like your firstborn.
yeah, that was amazing, but it wasn't as amazing as the following, because you would think that if you're building a product company and you're engineering oriented or an engineer, and that it's all about your product, you would expect the answer to come back around the 4 architectural pillars around product, revenue, team, and systems. That you would think that product would be the most important thing that these teams had to accomplish. And the truth is, every single CEO, bar none, team. Team was the fundamental issue. First, second, third, fourth. It was, and at different moments in time, different issues around the team, but it was always about the team. We hired the wrong person for the wrong job. Fundamentally, though, all of them also said is, and I'll just redact it into sort of this truism, which is hire slow, fire fast. most fired way too late. And I think the hard part is you're doing this with friends. You know, these are people who you're there 12, 18 hours a day. They might have been personal friends from another company, and you brought them with you, and they're with you. There's loyalty there. And now you're being asked, especially as a first-time CEO, to remove your personal feelings and look at the need of the business. This is really hard. It sounds easy, you know, on paper, but it's very hard to do, and we know it's hard because we see it in the metrics, we see it in the facts. So team, that was the most surprising thing to me. I did not expect that to take such a prominent role. And in fact, if you look across those 4 pillars, they each play a different prominent role based upon where you are in your journey. Early on, it's product, right? Product is super important. Then as you move into marketing and selling, revenue becomes an important pillar. And eventually into MBT and beyond, systems. Systems doesn't play much of a role. You'll see in the book, most of the feedback has nothing to do with systems because they're not at the point where they have to actually scale fast. So the point here is that if I were to redraw those pillars, right now they're all 4 equal, you know, they're 4, you know, squares. The truth is I should redraw this thing and either make team in the center and have 3 of those around the outside, or make team a big giant rectangle and stick those 3 on the side of them. So I was thinking about this with respect to my book. Of all the business books that I've read, whether it's Jeffrey Moore's books or it's Steve Blank's books, et cetera, there's always just a couple of things. But they have to be really, really important macro things that I can recall easily. So I actually was searching for a term to describe all of the things that you need to do to get ready to take your product to market. This category creation work, the issues around value propositions, doing statistically valid market surveys, price models, all of this different stuff. And I realized the best marketers in the world are just able to reduce things to simplistic terms. I think for me, the key takeaway, the number one, is this concept of market engineering. And just to remember that statistic that CB Insights says, which is no market need is the number one reason for market failure or product failure. And if you take a look at the fact that 85% of all products fail, and startups are really one product companies, it's not surprising that you see about an 85% or more failure rate among startups. If I do these things, am I going to succeed? And the answer to that is no. There's no guarantee. What there is, though, however, in my belief, or I would not have published the book, is that if you don't follow these principles, the likelihood of your success is highly mitigated. And so that's why I think you can follow the principles. Don't be a slave to the principles. This is not a Bible. This is a guide. It's a how-to prescriptive guide. And you can look at this and use your own intelligence to say, well, it's a different time, it's a different place, it's a different market. But more or less, I think that the guardrails that we put in around product, revenue, team, and systems, the value inflection points, the timing, and the metrics, those are all, I think, very accurate. What you specifically and precisely do to achieve those goals is a bespoke custom journey that will likely dictate whether you'll win or lose in the game of startups. My view and my advice is for teams to focus on legitimate markets. And what I mean by that is not customers. We hear about being customer-led or product-led. I fundamentally disagree with that because it gives you this very myopic view of what the market is. By definition, unless you own 100% of the market, you own very few customers. You know, you own a very small number of them, and as a startup, you own nothing. So my advice is to really get to understand what is the market. That would be people who are likely to buy, people who are unlikely to buy, partners, salespeople, all of these make up the market that you want to sell into. And for you as a team, you should remove your subjective bias and be ruthless towards objectivity in taking back the feedback from the market and to study the market and ask questions of it, and don't use confirmational bias, which is what we all want to do. We all want to basically say our baby's cute, and I just want to hear all the people tell me how cute my baby is. But to succeed, the takeaway is do not inject your subjective bias into it. Look at the market, not just the customers, not just the product, but look at the whole market.